Hey guys, so today we're going to be refitting my steel sump guard. So I got this a while ago, and inevitably I only actually ended up having it on for a couple of weeks. I didn't like the fitment method of them on standard, so I'm going to go back through today and show how we're going to sort of refit this, hopefully a little bit stronger. So this is the steel sump guard. So the general layout, if I zoom out a little bit, there you go. So these are the front, and then these bits here are the back. Ignore that. I've got that out for now. I'll be fitting that back in a moment. But that's just the sort of oil drain plug flat bit. But yeah, these are the front. And I only had it on for a couple of weeks. And anyone who has installed one of these before, if you've used all the standard stuff, you realise they use these horrible like 90-degree hook things. So it's like a hook that goes in next to the hole. I'll show it all in more detail when we get underneath the car. But it's all hooked up into a hole with a thread that dropped down, and you did a nut up onto it. And the two issues I saw immediately were, one, when you hook it up in, it can still move left and right quite easily. So as you're doing the nut up, it would turn. So if you can only turn X amount, you'd waste half of that with it just flailing around inside. The other issue I had was you've got a thread dropping down towards the floor. And lo and behold, the first time I went off-roading, this is what I exactly thought would happen. First time I went off-roading, rather than hitting this nice, slightly strong bit here, I hit the thread first. And it bent one of them almost back on itself and bucketed it all, and I had to cut it off in the end, which is why this came off. So that was one that was buckled, and the other one was completely missing. I have no idea what happened to that one, but that one was gone. So that was my sort of initial oops. You know, it doesn't really work very well, you know, having a thread hang down. The rear, it's fine. So these two at the bottom here, it uses the original holes from the original sump guard, and it gives you some slightly beefier bolts, and you just bolt them in at the back and it goes in fine. So that's no worries because the bolt's going up. So what I've devised for the front is a slightly modified way of doing it, which is going to be utilising these lovely heavy duty sort of carbon steel riv nuts. So this is M12. I'll put a link up to these in the description. They're just from Amazon, and I have to give a thank you to Ed from APD. Although he didn't sponsor this or provide any of the parts really, he actually went out of his way to find the link for these to send them to me, the nice decent strong ones. So yeah, big thank you to him for that, because you know, it certainly saves me a lot of time sort of having to do this whilst running the project, etc. So it was really appreciated that he found those. So all you're going to need is one of those. You're going to need an M12 by 40, so I think it's M12 by 1.75 by 40, which is what standard sort of thread for M12 is, M12 by 1.75. So a 40mm long one, and that's going to be for setting the riv nut. An M12 by 1.75 by 25, and that's one I'm actually going to use to hold the sump up. An M12 nut, so a nice little thin lock nut, and just a couple of washers. Boop. So it's not going to need a whole lot to fit this. You're just going to need two of these, one of the longer bolts and two of the shorter bolts. And you can use the original bolts they provide you for the bottom bit here. You can use the ones they provide you for that, they're perfectly adequate. But I'm using these. Okay, so if we're at the front of the vehicle, if we come down in underneath, I've put the bolts in where the rear ones are going to go, just to show you where they're going to go. So hopefully that makes it a little bit easier. It's just on the bottom of the subframe here. So I've put those in for now just to show you where they're going to go. And what you can do is get them up most of the way and then slot. Oh, hello cat, I don't know how I didn't notice you there. Hello. And then you can slot, because there's grooves on that sump guard rather than just holes. Effectively, yeah, you can just screw them up a fair bit and then just slide it on at the back, sorry. And that makes it a little bit easier when fitting it, especially on your own, because then you just have to lever the front up to get it hooked on for that, etc. So it's just a little thing that you can do to make it a little bit easier. You know, get it on the back first, lift it up to do the front, and then get it in the right kind of position. Okay, so we're looking at the front of the vehicle now, well, out towards the front, so there I am looking at the front. This is where I'm looking through the camera now. This is the original hole for the original sump guard. So just coming in a bit, you'll have a hole basically here. I've already set one riv nut into this one, and I'll show you on the other side what it looks like beforehand, and I'll show you how I set it in there without any sort of riv nut setting tools, etc. But this is the bolt in there, and it is very strong from what I've tested so far. I've hung the sump off of it, the sump guard off of it, and nothing happened, so I'm satisfied that that is definitely strong enough. But yeah, so there's your, look through the camera, there's the original hole. Follow it along and there'll be a hole, and that's where we're going to set the riv nut in on the other side. But this is just to demonstrate where the bolt goes, etc., and how it's going to work, because the sump guy is basically going to go onto that and we're going to bolt up into the body instead. Okay, so these are all the bits we're going to need to set the riv nut. I don't have two 19mm, so I'm using a 19 and a 3/4. Not ideal, but it works, it does the job plenty fine. So we're going to use the 40mm. We're going to get a washer on like that, and we're going to get the nut on there, so give me just a moment. So that's the nut threaded down onto there. We're now going to do another washer, so we now end up with this kind of a setup, and now it's just going to be threading this on, the riv nut onto that bolt. So that's what we're kind of going to end up with, and then we're going to undo this nut. So if you wind it this way, it's going to wind that nut up the thread, and that is now going to lock it against that riv nut, so you can see that washer doesn't move anymore, etc. I don't think I actually need this bottom one, but I just put them on there. I always have done, don't know why. So now you've set that against the riv nut, we're going to push it up into the hole, and I'll show you the hole in a moment, and this lip will stop it from going all the way in. So once it's pushed, it will stop. We're then going to undo this nut, which will push it up the thread, but because this can't move, effectively it pushes this bit down, and these splines here will squash, and what that means is this will be on the outside, this will be on the inside, and it will squash and crush it against the sort of internal parts of that bar. So I'll show you as it sets on there. Okay, so I tried a number of times to sort of try and record setting the riv nut whilst I was doing it, and it was just very difficult. So what I'm going to do now is just a quick recap of how I did it. This is on the driver's side. Now, your riv nut would be, well, it's up in here, so you would be pushing it up into that hole. Now, obviously, normally, this bolt would just be falling back out again. So what I did was I got a 19mm, which is what the nut was, and I rested that against this bar here. So that was going against there, so it wouldn't spin. And then I cupped it with my hand, like so that it would keep the riv nut up, because you know, when you got the tension on that nut, it would hold it up in there. And then I got my 3/4, because I got the two 19s, I got a 3/4 on that bottom one, on the ring spanner, and I turned it anti-clockwise, as if I was undoing that bolt. And because you're holding this nut still, so I got that washer up there as well, so basically I'm holding it like this. That bodywork there is holding the spanner still, and basically from there it was just making sure that this stayed flat as much as you could, so you know, as best as you can cup it and use the bodywork to stop it from spinning, and your hand to stop it, and your hand to stay steady, and then turn that one anti-clockwise. Okay, so I appreciate this probably isn't the best angle. It's the best I can do whilst underneath, I'm afraid. I got these two. So what I used was the 19, as I said, up in here. Where is it? Mine will turn a little bit. I just locked it against the bodywork like that. So you can see I can hold the spanner up, and I can hold it against the bodywork. Hopefully that shows on the video. Let's see if I can adjust the lighting a little. So yeah, hopefully you can see it there on the video. Sorry, I'm not taking the camera there for a moment. That I'm locking it against the bodywork using my palm, and then pushing up to lock it in. I then got my 3/4 onto that bottom one, and I would turn it in towards the bodywork. Obviously on the other side you'd be going outward, but on this side I'd have it here. If I take that spanner off, and I would turn it that way. So obviously mine's set already, so I would turn it this way whilst that spanner is locking it in there. Once you've got it set, so it will be really stiff to start with, but once you're happy that it's set, what you can do to test, take the spanner out of the way and just turn this bottom one without holding this top one without holding that top one still, and what will happen is, if the riv nut is set, it will just allow the bolt to undo from it. If it isn't set quite yet, what will happen is the riv nut will spin with this, so you just end up spinning both and nothing will happen. So if this bolt comes out, you know it's set. If it isn't set, just keep turning it. It will be stiff, but it will eventually set, and then you can just get these bits out. But that riv nut is out, in there, and solid. So that's the driver's side set. I believe I showed you the other side earlier on, but that's both riv nuts in. These, like I say, these were the original holes here that you used. No longer using them, so we're now using these ones. So next thing I'm probably going to do is put the bolts into these holes, and the way it's going to work is I'm going to lift the front up and hook it onto them, put a back bolt in, and then lift up the rest of it. So let's see how that goes. Okay, yep, so I've got both bolts in there. So there's one and there's the other, and like I say, I'm only doing them in a little bit because what I'm going to do is the sump guard that's obviously got the grooves on it, they should then slide into here. That's going to hold them up. We can then rotate the back up and get it into the back ones. We'll get a back bolt in, and then put one of those, and then do all of them up. The reason I'm putting these in first is because of this bodywork. If you hook it on at the back first, it hits this bodywork and you can't get up to that bolt. So I'm going to do the front first, hook that in, just onto here. Just slide it onto the threads, and I'll show you how we're going to do it, and then I'll show in the video how it's gone on. Okay, so sorry about the noise there, but what we've done effectively is just made those slightly wider, so the M12 bolts easily fit through. They would go on before, but you'd have to slide them on. So just to make it a little bit easier on ourselves, we've just widened it ever so slightly, just so those M12s fit on nice and easy for when we're trying to get it lined up and sort of slid on a bit. You know, you don't want to be bugging about trying to get it in between the threads. Just sits in there nice and easy now. So the bolts are like underneath here, which is why you've got to do the front first. Does this plate hold the plastic up there? No. It goes underneath it. Which is why I was finding it difficult. You've got to go back and then lift it forward onto those two bolts there. For 2 people it'll probably be fairly easy, but right, there we go. That's the front one's hooked in. What do I do with those back bolts? Right. That one comes to the back. And get one of them in. So there's no gap there or anything, is there now? Nope. Nice. Right, thank you very much. That was super easy. Okay, so hopefully that shows you how easy it was to get it on. I mean, with 2 people it's always going to be a little bit easier, but having those bolts up in riv nuts and just able to have it slide in, you know, making it ever so slightly wider just so you can slide those bolts, well, when you look at those grooves on that sump guard, just slide it up onto those bolts and it just holds it there. So then you got the front hooked in, lifted the back up and put the back bolts in. It was so much easier than the first time I did that. That was literally 30 seconds. The first time we were chuffing about with those hooks and trying to get them to line up, and they were flailing around inside, they kept disappearing, trying to get the nuts to bite onto them, etc. So having those M12 riv nuts in there and just sliding it on, like, my god, that's easier. And I can show you the fitment in a minute and how much tidier it is and how much more up inside the body it is as well. So with those hooks you would just have them dangling down, and like I said before, the first thing that happened was I ruined them going off-roading because they hit the bolts before, well, they hit the nut bit coming down, well, the bolt bit coming down before they hit the sump guard. So let's go underneath and I'll quickly show you, and then I'll get them tightened up and that's it done. Okay, so that's the groove. Trying to get the angle on it, sorry. You can just about see the groove there, trying to lift the bodywork down, but that's the groove there, and it just slid the bolt, slid it in through the bolt there, and we can do it with a washer, and there's plenty of room there still. Same as on the camera, wait for it to adjust. Same as on that side there. You can sort of see it there, just nicely slid onto those bolts, holding it really tight. And then if I come to the back here, hopefully you can see that. I'm holding the camera at a bit of a funny angle, but yeah, super easy in comparison to what it came with as standard. You know, an extra sort of, you know, half hour set aside to fit them, just to get those riv nuts in. Like I say, they are a bit stiff because they are, you know, they are hard. Those ones were carbon steel ones, so they were quite tight. But once they're in there, you know, you putting that effort in really just makes it so much easier to fit. and just makes it coming on and off. You know, if you need to take it off for any reason and put it back on again, etc., you're just saving yourself so much time each time you do it. Okay, so I'm just going to do it up tight now. So this is going to be doing 19s on the front and I believe 13s at the back. I'll use a spanner for this just because there's not a whole lot of room on the front. So, that is on solid. Okay, so that's it all on, all tightened up, and like you say, strong as an ox under there. So really happy with that. I'm glad you know, I gave it a bit of thought and how to actually get it back in there. You know, once I sort of dented and, well, once I sort of bent one of those hooks and lost the other one, I looked at just sort of getting replacements in, but then I thought, well, how can I make it better? And that certainly does the job. It is on there super strong. I can't see that being any weaker than what they gave. If anything, I think it's going to be stronger, to be honest, because I lost them on the first off-road trip. So obviously, yeah, see how it goes. But yeah, for now that seems like a much better way to do it. A bit more thought out, a bit more work at the start, but once you've done that extra work, then every subsequent time it's going to be easier. You know, I think that's going to be the main benefit of this. You know, spend a little bit longer fitting it, but then every time you're taking it on and off after that is going to be infinitely quicker. So yeah, makes it a lot easier. Hopefully you guys like that video. Hopefully it's useful for some people who are fitting these and buying these, or have fit them and definitely want to change how it's fitted, etc. Yeah, hopefully helpful to you guys, and I'll see you on the next video.